Citizens of Chicago, this Martyrs Memorial is much needed in your city. These 8 men were convicted unjustly, and we need your support to show that they won't be forgotten. The jury of the Haymarket case was illegally biased against the innocent defendants, who had nothing to do with the brutality that occurred during the Haymarket affair. Chicago police officers tried to calm down the worker riot at the McCormick Harvester plant in Haymarket Square. However, they ended up making it much worse. In fact, one worker got killed and many others were wounded. Laborers during the Haymarket era faced harsh working conditions. These conditions included poor pay, child labor, and wage cuts. The laborers went on strike for better working conditions, which led to police beating them and throwing them in jail. This is an image of the McCormick Reaper factory. Many laborers worked there during the mid-1800s. The working conditions were poor and unsafe, and the pay was just enough, sometimes not enough, for people to provide for their families. Innocent people that were holding peaceful public meetings were beaten and shot by police. This was unlawful, especially for police, since the people have the right to assemble peacefully to consult for the common good. During the 1885 strike at the McCormick Reaper factory, Pinkertons, men who specialized in ending strikes, were called upon to serve their duty. However, when they were making their way to the factory, they shot several innocent people that were observing their march through the streets. Police brutality would continue. This is a portrait of Captain Bonfield. He was a leader and contributor of unnecessary violence toward the public. He ordered his men to club and beat innocent civilians. After this occurred, no more than an investigation would take place.
After these innocent men were clubbed and beaten by the police, they were thrown into prison. If that was not enough, when they were thrown into confinement, they were not properly booked by the police. This made it even more difficult for people to bail these innocent victims out of jail. This picture represents how people's houses were ransacked by police without reason. Jacob Michelanda was a witness to this abuse. He stated that his house was ransacked by police who did not have a search warrant. They beat him and then abused his wife.
This is an image of the actual bomb that was thrown during the Haymarket affair. It was made with a metal outer casing and was filled with dynamite ready to be ignited. The throwing of the bomb during the affair was most likely an act of revenge against Captain Bonfield for clubbing, killing, or imprisoning someone they knew. This picture shows a large mass of innocent laborers in Chicago that seem to be trying to escape from a large fire. It also looks like some of the men were shot by policemen shown in the drawing. They most likely worked for Captain Bonfield. This is an image of one of the articles that was made by Frank Leslie of Chicago. Many of the articles were biased against the defendants since people were angered and stressed by the deaths of innocent loved ones. This shows an image of the defendants being hanged after being accused guilty. It was unreasonable to convict these 8 men who were never proven to have a connection with the affair, while ignoring Captain Bonfield and his men beating and imprisoning so many innocent people. The Cook County Courthouse was under construction during the 1870s.
The examination of the jurors that participated in the Haymarket case occurred at this Cook County Courthouse. The system that was used was very loose and unprofessional. All the jurors had to say to be allowed to participate was that they would make an unbiased decision about the defendants based only on evidence. This did not mean that they would. All of the jurors were challenged by the defendants on the ground of being prejudiced. Most of these challenges were overruled by the judge after the jurors simply stated that they would be able to make an unbiased decision. I believe that the parties are guilty. I would try to go by the evidence, but in this case, it would be awful hard work for me to do it, replied George Porter, who was examined as a juror for the case. He was eventually allowed to participate in the jury. This was the attitude that was shared by many of the jurors. Some of them straight out admitted their opinions would get the better of them, but most of those people were still allowed into the jury. The jurors being biased and prejudiced against the defendants was an illegal act. According to the Constitution, an impartial jury is required, and a decision must be based on evidence only. This was ignored during the Haymarket case. The court judge defended his conviction of the accused men by saying there was no precedent or law book for a case of this sort. This was not a reason to convict 8 men when the evidence provided favored them being innocent. It was not fair to convict the men after they were tried in front of a prejudiced jury. This image represented the defendants' rights being restricted and the consequence of their convictions, in some cases being death. This image shows the 8 defendants being negatively labeled as anarchists even though they were innocent. This was most likely a drawing done by the public who had negative opinions of the men that supposedly lost them their loved ones. 7 known police officers were either killed or wounded by the bomb that was thrown during the Haymarket affair. Some of them were friends of the jurors, which made them become even more bitter towards the defendants during the case. These 8 men deserve our support, even though they lost in court.